I want to be precise about something before I begin, because precision matters in what I'm about to tell you, and I spent enough of my career hiding behind imprecision to have lost my tolerance for it. I am not a hero. I did not do what I did because I am a fundamentally good person who, when faced with a moral test, passed it cleanly. I did what I did because I reached a point where not doing it became more unbearable than doing it, and that is a much less flattering motivation, but it is the true one. If the cost had been smaller, I might have stayed quiet. I need you to know that. I need you to hold that alongside everything else I'm going to tell you. My name is not important. What is important is that for 19 years I was a detective with a mid-sized police department in the South. I'll leave the specific city out of this because there are people still living there whose lives could be affected by the details, and protecting people is a habit I haven't been able to fully break. I was good at my job. I want to say that plainly, not as self-congratulation, but as context, because the story only means something if you understand that I wasn't a bad detective who did bad work. I was a good detective who did one piece of very bad work and then spent years pretending I hadn't. I made detective at 31, homicide at 34. I closed cases. I had a clearance rate that my lieutenant cited in meetings. I worked long hours without much complaint, was twice commended for meritorious service, and believed, with the unexamined confidence of someone who has never seriously tested his own beliefs, that I was on the right side of things, that the work I did made the world incrementally safer and more just, that when the system worked, which was most of the time, it worked because people like me were careful and thorough and honest. I'm going to tell you about the Damon Reeves case. In the spring of my 37th year, the body of a 23-year-old woman named Carla Hutchins was found in a park on the east side of the city. She had been strangled. She'd been there for approximately 18 hours before a man walking his dog found her early on a Sunday morning. She was a dental hygienist. She had 2 younger brothers and a mother who drove 45 minutes each way to clean office buildings at night. She deserved better than what happened to her, and she deserved better than what happened to her case. I was the lead detective. We had limited physical evidence. The crime scene had been compromised by rain, and what we recovered was partial and ambiguous. We had no witnesses. What we had was a name that surfaced early through a tip, an anonymous call to the department's tip line 3 days after the discovery that named Damon Reeves as someone who had been bothering Carla Hutchins in the weeks before her death. Damon Reeves was 26 years old. He worked at an auto parts store. He had a prior arrest for misdemeanor assault from 3 years earlier, a fight outside a bar, charges eventually reduced, and no other record. He lived 6 blocks from the park. He knew Carla peripherally through a social circle that overlapped at the edges, the way social circles do in particular neighborhoods. He had no alibi for the night in question that we could independently verify. He said he was home. He said he was alone. I want to be as honest as I can about what happened next, which means I have to be honest about something uncomfortable. I was under pressure. I don't say that as an excuse. I say it because it's part of the mechanism of what happened, and if I leave it out, the story is incomplete. Carla Hutchins' murder had been covered in the local paper. Her mother had given a television interview. My lieutenant was asking for updates in a way that communicated, without saying it directly, that updates that moved toward resolution were preferred over updates that didn't. I had a clearance rate to maintain. I had a reputation built on closing cases. None of that justifies what happened, but it is the weather in which it happened. The investigation of Damon Reeves moved in ways that I orchestrated and that I can now see with excruciating clarity were shaped by conclusion-first thinking. I was not looking for the truth. I was looking for confirmation. There is a difference, and I knew the difference. I had been trained to know the difference, and I ignored it. The anonymous tip I could not verify. The witness who placed Damon in the park the night of the murder gave a statement that, when I read it now, contains equivocations I smoothed over in my written summary. The physical evidence was genuinely ambiguous, and I characterized it in reports in ways that were not falsified, not exactly, but shaped, arranged to point in a direction. A fiber from the victim's jacket was found on a sweatshirt retrieved from Damon's apartment. That's true. What my report underemphasized is that the specific type of fiber was common, the kind of thing that transfers between people in casual contact, and that the sweatshirt showed no other trace evidence linking it to the crime scene. I found what I was looking for because I was looking for it. And Damon Reeves, who maintained his innocence through every interview, through his trial, through his sentencing, was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 22 years. He was 26 years old when they took him away. His mother fainted in the courtroom. I remember that. I told myself what detectives tell themselves. The jury decided. The system worked. I did my job. I told myself this regularly and with diminishing conviction over the following years, the way you repeat something hoping repetition will do the work of truth. I made detective at 42. I got a commendation the same year. I went home to a house I'd bought with my wife, Sandra, who taught elementary school and made a specific kind of lemon pound cake on Sundays and asked me sometimes why I seemed far away. I told her the job. It's always the job. That's a sentence detectives learn early because it's always at least partly true and therefore always at least partly sufficient. The case came back to me 11 years later in a form I did not expect. I was 51. 2 years from retirement, working cold cases, a kind of transition assignment that the department gave to senior detectives winding down, reviewing old files, looking for anything DNA technology or new databases might illuminate. It was quiet work. I didn't mind it. I told Sandra it was a good way to finish. The file that landed on my desk in February of that year was not the Hutchins case. It was a strangling from 7 years after Hutchins, a different victim, different part of the city, officially classified as unsolved. I was reviewing it as part of a batch, no particular reason, routine cold case protocol. What made me stop was a name in a witness statement deep in the file. The anonymous tip for the Hutchins case had come from a tip line, caller unidentified. Standard procedure at the time was to log the tip and move on. But in this cold case file, there was a statement from a woman, a peripheral witness, interviewed and released, whose name I recognized. It was the same name, not verified, not confirmed, but the same unusual name that had appeared in the background documentation of the Hutchins tip investigation, the name of someone who had apparently called in tips on multiple occasions over the years. She had a connection to the man who was eventually identified as a person of interest in this later case, a man who had never been charged because the investigation stalled, but whose profile, whose method, whose relationship to the later victim bore characteristics that began to reorder things in my head. I sat with that file for a long time.
I pulled the Hutchins case file from archive storage. I read it with the specific, horrible attention of someone who knows where the bodies are buried because they buried them. I read my own summaries and my own notes and my own characterizations of evidence, and I saw, clearly and without the protective coloration of time and career investment, what I had done. Not evil, not corrupt in the cartoonish sense, but wrong. Fundamentally, consequentially, irreversibly wrong. Damon Reeves had served 11 years of his 22-year sentence by this point. He was 37 years old. I went home that night and sat in my car in the driveway for a long time. Sandra came out after 20 minutes. She could see me from the kitchen window and knocked on the car window and asked if I was all right. I told her I needed to tell her something. We sat in the car together, in the driveway, and I told her everything, all of it, the whole shape of it. She didn't say much while I talked. When I was done, she was quiet for a while, and then she said, "What are you going to do?" That question, that exact question. I went to the district attorney's office, not to my lieutenant, not to internal affairs first, to the DA, because I pulled the Hutchins case file from archive storage. I read it with the specific, horrible attention of someone who knows where the bodies are buried because they buried them. I read my own summaries and my own notes and my own characterizations of evidence, and I saw, clearly and without the protective coloration of time and career investment, what I had done. Not evil, not corrupt in the cartoonish sense, but wrong. Fundamentally, consequentially, irreversibly wrong. Damon Reeves had served 11 years of his 22-year sentence by this point. He was 37 years old. I went home that night and sat in my car in the driveway for a long time. Sandra came out after 20 minutes. She could see me from the kitchen window and knocked on the car window and asked if I was all right. I told her I needed to tell her something. We sat in the car together, in the driveway, and I told her everything. All of it, the whole shape of it. She didn't say much while I talked. When I was done, she was quiet for a while, and then she said, "What are you going to do?" That question, that exact question. I went to the district attorney's office, not to my lieutenant, not to internal affairs first, to the DA, because I understood enough about institutional self-protection to know that routing this internally first increased the likelihood of it being managed rather than addressed. I brought documentation. I brought the cold case file and the Hutchins file, and a written summary I had prepared over the preceding 2 weeks that laid out, as precisely as I could make it, what I had found and what I believed it meant. The DA was a woman in her late 40s who had a reputation for being professionally difficult and ethically serious, which is a combination I had not always appreciated, but appreciated enormously in that moment. She read my summary while I sat across from her desk. She asked several questions, sharp and specific. She did not perform surprise, and she did not reassure me. When she was done, she said she would need to verify everything independently, that the process would take time, and that I should be prepared for significant consequences in multiple directions. She meant this, I understood, as both warning and statement of fact. I said I understood. I was placed on administrative leave within the week. This was expected. What was less expected, or perhaps I had expected it and simply not fully reckoned with what it would feel like, was the response from colleagues. Men and women I had worked alongside for years went quiet in a way that was its own kind of communication. 2 people I considered genuine friends stopped returning my calls. My lieutenant, a man I had respected, sent me a text that said only, "Couldn't have predicted you'd do something like this," and which I have read approximately 200 times trying to find a way to interpret it charitably. Sandra stayed. I need to say that. There were weeks that were very hard, and she stayed through all of them, and I don't have a tidy explanation for why she did, except that she is a person of genuine moral substance who had apparently seen something in me that was worth the difficulty. I haven't stopped being grateful for that. The DA's investigation took 8 months. The Innocence Organization that got involved, a non-profit legal team that handled wrongful conviction cases, took another 4 months on top of that. Damon Reeves had, in fact, never stopped asserting his innocence. He had filed appeals that went nowhere, written letters that accumulated in a file, maintained for 11 years the position that he had not done what he was convicted of doing. He was released on Thursday in October. I know this because I asked to be told when it happened. I did not go to the release. That was not my place, and I understood that. But I asked to be told, and someone from the Innocence Organization sent me a one-line email. He walked out at 10:47 a.m. I was in my kitchen when the email came. I read it and sat down on the floor, not dramatically, just because the floor was where I ended up, and stayed there for a while. Sandra came in and found me there and sat down next to me without asking. We sat on the kitchen floor for maybe 10 minutes without saying much. Damon Reeves did not want to meet me. He communicated this through his attorney, politely but clearly, and I respected it completely. I respected it in the way that you respect a boundary that is not just reasonable, but that you have no standing whatsoever to contest. What I took from him cannot be given back by a meeting. 11 years, his 20s. The early death of his father, which occurred while he was incarcerated and which he was not permitted to attend the funeral for. Things I can enumerate, but not restore. I retired 14 months ago. My pension was reduced as part of the administrative outcome of the investigation. Not eliminated, but reduced. I did not contest this. A civil suit related to the wrongful conviction is ongoing, naming me and the department, and will likely result in a settlement that will come partly from me. This is also appropriate. What I do now is work with a small organization that advocates for reforms to eyewitness testimony and evidence handling procedures in criminal investigations. It is not glamorous work. It involves a lot of writing and a lot of meetings, and occasional testimony before legislative committees that listen politely and change things slowly. I don't know how much difference it makes. I do it anyway. I think about Damon Reeves often. Not obsessively, not in a way that I've romanticized into my own redemption arc. I'm aware of how easy it is to center yourself in a story that belongs to someone else. I think about him in the specific, recurring way that you think about something that is genuinely unresolved and will remain so. There is no version of what happened that becomes okay. There is only what you do with the remainder of your days after you've understood what you did with the ones before. Carla Hutchins deserved justice. She got a conviction and a closed file, and a real perpetrator who was never held accountable because I was moving in the wrong direction and moving fast. That's the other wound, the one people don't always see in this kind of story. Damon Reeves wasn't the only one failed by what I did. Sandra made lemon pound cake last Sunday. I ate 2 slices and told her it was perfect, which it was. We are quieter with each other than we used to be, but not in a distant way. In the way of people who have said the important things and don't need to perform the rest. I'm 53 years old. I sleep lightly. I don't think that'll change. But I sleep, and every morning I get up and do the work that's left. That has to be enough. I've decided it has to be enough. Because for Damon Reeves, for 11 years, there was nothing left at all.